Good afternoon, people. Yo, yo, yo. There's not enough words for what I can use to tell you what you're about to get into right now. We are about to jump in the mess. We are going to talk about the proverbial junk, all the elephants that we ignore, that we know are in the room with us, that we have to use our days to go about and ignore. We are about to talk about it. We naming the names in here today. And I'm so excited for you, for what you're about to experience, right? And so this panel, which is moving from old to new, transforming white orgs with a liberatory frame, is going to be held by the sister that I've only known for a little over a year. But listen, she's one of the best humans I know. Her name is Trish Adebiachum. She is the Senior Director of Leadership, Research, and Practice and Sterling Network Organizer for the Robert Sterling Clark Foundation. And for me, Trish is not only one of the most humble individuals that I know, right? In so many cases, she could be doing and leading in the front, but she constantly uses her power and her energy to lift up those around her. But also, I kind of see her, and this is my own personal opinion, as the glue that helps support the vision that we are putting forth into the world. And she's an amazing, wonderful person. And I'm so excited for her to facilitate this panel. So Trish, take us away.
Whew, I wasn't ready for that. I'm all, y'all have to give me a minute to collect myself. And just any chance you have today, just drop it in the chat. Just send a little love to Kairishi. Just, I mean, um, it's one thing to support the dreams of other Black women, but it actually takes a lot of courage and vision to have the dream in the first place. And we're all having the experience of being inside of Kairishi's dream. So much love and gratitude to you, Kairishi, for all of this. Um, and she's right. We're about to get into it. I talk about today's panel, let me talk to you about yesterday. All right. So actually, let me talk to you about after yesterday. Okay, so here on the East Coast, conference ended about 5:25. By 5:30, excuse my language, you couldn't tell me shit. All right, I was walking around like, you know how, you'll have something that you're feeling or you're thinking, and like 20 people can be like, yeah, I agree with you or I affirm, but you have that like one auntie, right? Or like a grandmother, that one sister friend that when she says that it's right, when she agrees with you, it's like everybody just get out of my way, okay? Yesterday was like spending the entire day with that person, right? Every panel that I went to, it was just like, yeah, no, you're right. Yeah, no, that happens. No, that is real, right? And this is what you do with it. This is what it could mean for our future, right? And so, listen, Brooklyn had a problem last night. I was walking around. I didn't even have anywhere to go. I was just wandering around, being large and liberated. And I have all of you to thank for that. So much appreciation. I'm excited for more of that today. Um, let's talk about our opening panel yesterday. So for those of you who are able to join, they were talking about our panel opening plenary yesterday was about building liberatory organizations from the ground up, right? And we were so blessed to have Cindy from GGJ, Blue Lewis from NC Block. We had Tenjiwe from Blackbird, right? So these were women of color who were talking about what it looks like to intentionally build organizations that could be spaces basically to practice how we want to be with each other, right? Spaces where we could prefigure or get to practice and live into right now the world that we're fighting for, right? So these are women that were talking about what it looks like to build those kinds of organizations. And they painted these really just like beautiful images of what it will look like, the beauty and the struggle. And I know I was just inspired and ready. Today's conversation is going to be a little bit different, right? So the folks who were on the call yesterday were talking about organizations that they themselves had either founded or were founded by other folks of color who already had freedom on their minds, right? They were stewarding these organizations that were built for a very specific purpose. But today, with the folks that I'm lucky enough to share space with this morning, we're going to talk about what it looks like to transform organizations, right? To work within systems or to work within systems that actually weren't built with freedom in mind, right? Weren't built with liberation in mind. Not necessarily built without that in mind, but just weren't intentionally built with that in mind, right? So what does it look like? What does it look like to transform these organizations, particularly white-led organizations, using a liberatory framework, right? So that's what we're going to get into today. Um, just so you know where we're going, by the end of this session, we want to make sure that we have this shared understanding about a few things, right? So one, we want to make sure that we understand that we're all swimming in dominant culture, all of us, right? We're all swimming in dominant culture, and so it can show up even in BIPOC spaces, right? So that's something that we want to make sure that we lead today understanding. But we also want to make sure that we leave understanding that when we talk about building liberatory organizations, we just have this more nuanced understanding of what it is that we're moving away from and what it is we're moving towards, right? So you're going to hear that over and over again from the folks who we're sharing space with today. But lastly, what I'm really excited about is like the heart of it. Yesterday, one of the things I loved was that I walked away with like very practical strategies and tools, right? So we're going to talk about what are the actual mindsets and practices necessary for transforming organizations and institutions, right? So you'll get some real takeaways as well. And we have the right people with us this afternoon or evening, depending on where you're sitting, or morning. We have the right people to help us with this conversation today. And they're really repping a wide range of spaces and perspectives on this topic. So I'm very, very excited. In a moment, I'm going to give them each a chance to get into some deep introductions of themselves, but just so you know who's with us, we have Erica Stallings, who's the co-ED of Leadership Learning Community. We have Dr. Aja Denise Reynolds, Dr. Aja Denise Reynolds. I'm going to say it. She's more humble than I am. I'm like, you're a doctor. Dr. Aja Denise Reynolds, Assistant Professor of Urban Education and Critical Race Studies at Wayne State in Detroit. We have Napo Mashiani, who's a playwright, a poet, a stage director, a producer, a teacher, and you all aren't ready for her hairdo. I'm just letting you know. Just get ready. And then finally, we have Liz Darius, who is the co-ED of Compass Point, and another just wise soul that we're going to get to spend some time with here today. So welcome, get ready, and I'm going to start with you, Erica. My dear friend and sister, if you could share just your name, your preferred pronouns, sorry, where you're situated, and then yeah, just a little bit about for those of us who are interested in liberation. Maybe you could speak to why does this conversation about organizations matter, right? If we're talking about liberation, big picture, why does thinking and talking about organizations and institutions matter? So welcome.
Hey, Trish. So Erica Stallings, she, her pronouns. I'm in Queens, New York, on Lenape land, and I'm co-ED of the Leadership Learning Community, which is a national organization. I was told to be brief, so I'm going to. So Trish, if you want me to say more, you're gonna have to tell me. And so why organizations matter. LLC, we like to describe our work and our space as like a play space. And so we think at organizations as a space where you can create containers for practicing new ways of being, so we can try on some new stuff. And so that's how we think of LLC and how we think of organizations. And then I just think about the reality is that we spend probably 8 hours a day. You know, a third of the time that you're not sleeping, you're probably at work. And so if we're trying to be living liberated lives, for such a large chunk of it to not be engaged with the question of liberation, something would be missing. And so for us to be able to have a whole liberated life, those large chunks like the workplace or where we spend our time at organizations, like that space has to be exploring the question.
Absolutely. Yes. It's where we spend our time. It's where we get to practice. I love it. Thank you, Erica. Dr. Aja, I'm coming to you. What does this look like in academia? Talk to us about that. Who are you? Where are you? And why do institutions like the academy matter?
Thank you. Yeah, so Dr. Asia Reynolds, I am in Detroit, also known as Wawatna land, formerly by the indigenous people, and my pronouns are she and her. And particularly when I think about this question in academia, I really just think about the great influence that academia has and how we engage in the world. And particularly when I think about certain research that has come out of these places, that both has been helpful in us understanding the human experience, and the layers of what people are experiencing, but also much of the research that has been so harmful in creating these ideals about race, these ideals about gender and sexuality, um, that have we saw play out in real ways, right? That people can say, I can call on this research as a way to pathologize Black communities. And so I see my work in that space and trying to disrupt that, and confront those type of legacies in those spaces. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, the acknowledgement that some of the institutions that we're in shape other institutions and culture, society at large. It's not a joke. And so we're very lucky to have folks like you on the inside. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Reynolds. We are also joined by Napo Mashiani, right? Where are you coming to us from, Napo, right? Talk about it. Why
Um,
does your space
um,
matter? Yes.
Thank you so much for introducing this amazing platform, and thank you so much, Trish. And of course, I'm honored to be sharing this space with everyone. I'm from South Africa, so this is literally in the evening. I was born in Soweto, and I am currently the artistic director of a Performing Arts Free State, which is an institution that was formed in 1963, to perpetuate, to celebrate, to push the apartheid culture, and really, really, formed for white community, and to celebrate their art, but also where propaganda in terms of the oppression of Black people within the South African, the southern part, was key. I'm the first Black woman to sit on this chair. So there's a lot of weeds around my garden, as I'm saying it, and a lot of old trees around my garden that constantly I have to, cut or, shape. But I also understand the importance of me being in this space. This is a space where my mom or my grandmother or my aunt never dreamt that they will be allowed to enter, let alone a number of my own generation. They never dreamt that they can ever even perform on these 5 big stages. This is one of the biggest theater in South Africa. So it's a blessing that came out of a curse. And I understand that it's a privilege that I cannot take for granted. And I really, really feel I need to be here so that those young girls, Black girls who come after me can see the possibility of changing the narrative and putting ourselves in the forefront of our land, of our stories, of everything else. So I'm flipping the script, as I say.
Told you you all weren't ready. But it's absolutely, I just thank you for those images, weeds and trees and flipping the script and also calling in your mother and your grandmothers, right? Like the folks that are watching you, whether from this plane or from another, and are celebrating the work that you're doing, right? This script flipping that you're doing. I'm excited to hear more about how you're going about doing that and how we can walk with you. Thank you for being here, Napo. Last but like absolutely not least, we have Liz Darius from Compass Point. Yeah, so talk to us about you. Talk to us about who you are, how you like to be referred to, where you're situated and why organizations matter.
Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. Good evening. I'm Liz. I go by she or her, and I am so excited to be here with Kairishi, Trish, Aja, Dr. Aja, excuse me, Erica, Nafo. I am currently living in the land of Hawaii, which was illegally annexed by the United States. But I'm the co-executive director of an organization named Compass Point, which for the last 50 years, excuse me, has been situated in the Bay Area, although we are national serving organization. And this is a great question. So organizations matter because they are the sites where we get to practice self-governance. These are the places in which we get to analyze power and to practice shifting power. So Erica talked about practicing and praxis. And for us at Compass Point, the way we think about it is that our organizations are a microcosm of society. So we have people from all different ancestral histories, different relationships to the land, different identities, different beliefs, all in one organization. And we get to figure out in our organization how to transform those relationships with one another. And for us, we hope that it pivots us into thinking about how to transform our systems of oppression towards liberation. And we think it's a privilege to be an organization because it helps to continue the Black radical movement, which has always had different kinds of organizations and different formations, whether they've been in nonprofits or not. So we find ourselves very lucky to be working in organization.
And we're lucky to have your perspective and wisdom and your organizational stance with us today, Liz. I appreciate you. And I'm not mad that you're in Hawaii while I'm freezing here in Brooklyn. I'm happy for you. Um, so, um, so I told you that these are the right people, right? And we're gonna really hear from them. You already hear we have these different strategies that are working here with us. You have folks that are running and training and supporting organizations and leaders within organizations. You have folks that are researching and convening, folks who are leading. You have academics and researchers, and we have artists in the space with us. All of these strategies are necessary for transformation, right? But before we get into that, let's get clear, right? Let's develop. I heard Liz talking about shared political analysis, right? Like let's develop our shared analysis. Sometimes it's obvious what we're moving away from. You have the case of apartheid, right? Like minority rule, moving away from minority rule, right? Moving to majority rule. Um, but sometimes it's not as obvious as all of that, what it is that what it is that we are divesting from and what it is that we're trying to cultivate. So I want to give folks an opportunity to talk about that. When we talk about transforming white organizations, we're kind of using the term white organizations as a catch-all, right? Um, from uh, a space that doesn't serve liberatory goals to something that does. So I want folks to just talk about that. Like, what is it that from where you sit, what is it that you're moving away from, and what is it that you're moving towards? And I'm gonna come back to you, Erica. So you can start us off.
I'll take it. I think when I thought about this question, I realized that I'm making some assumptions, and we might not all be making the same assumption. But I'm making the assumption that this transformation, the point of it is to better align the organization with whoever they are accountable to. And so that's part of the background of my thinking. And you said that this being white, a white organization is a catch-all. And I think the point of the transformation that's most important is the application of a liberatory lens. For me, that's the most important part, because I think that makes it more than just racial representation. Because as you mentioned, you can have BIPOC leadership, all BIPOC staff, all BIPOC board, and still be steeped in white supremacy. So applying the liberatory lens for me is the most important part of the transformation conversation. And I know that even in my own head, as I think about this, I still mix up, white representation and having white leadership in the organization. And for me, I know untangling those two things can be challenging even in my own head, even as I know that they're different things. But getting to your question of like, what are we moving away from and toward? For me, when I just sat with that question, I thought that I am moving away from organizational practices that make me feel compartmentalized, or I feel like pieces of me have been eroded, or I'm broken down into bits. And there's something about breaking and being small, that is the what I'm moving away from. And there's something about wholeness that I'm moving toward, and where wholeness is a choice. So I am complete and whole, and then I can be in choice about what I share and what I don't share. But in whatever case, I'm not a widget, I'm not a tool, I'm not a part of something, I'm a whole person. And that's the thing that I hope that the organization is providing to me as a person, to everyone else on staff, our board, and the people who make up our community. And so for me, what we're moving away from is misalignment of values and practices, and moving toward an actual alignment of practices with our values. So we believe this, therefore our actions are, so we believe X, therefore we do actions that are in alignment with those values. So for me, that's the transfer, that's the shift. So there's no but. There's no, we believe that we should be doing X, Y, and Z, but there's no but. It's just, we believe we should be doing X, Y, and Z, therefore that's what we do.
I love it. This call to wholeness and choice, right? Like being able to make choices from that place of wholeness, not having to leave any part of yourself outside the door, right? Ashe. Um, Liz, I'm going to come to you next, right? Because, one, just anything that resonated from that, but also like, I just keep thinking about how you're holding this like toggling almost, right? Like you are a co-director of an organization and you're supporting all of these other organizations, right? And so you're doing the work internally. You're also like leading the work or supporting the work for other organizations. And so, yeah, just this question about like what it is that you're moving from and what you're moving towards. And then like, what does it mean to also be guiding other people in that journey? I
Yeah.
would love to hear from you.
Yeah, that's a great question, Trish. Thanks for offering that. So, Compass Point is a capacity building and training center, and we've been around for almost 50 years. And this is the first time we've had myself, a Black executive or a Black senior manager. And so I kind of have to laugh at that sometimes. It's like almost 50 years, and we're an organization that does work around racial justice. And so, I think the things that we are moving away from, ultimately, it's not just about, I think, moving away from white ways of being or white habits in the culture of our organizations, but it's more what Erica was saying around becoming whole people, recognizing our whole selves. And so for us, what we're divesting from, what we're moving away from, is the ways in which our organizations are governed around white supremacy. So it's not just the culture, it's the values, it's the principles, it's the systems, it's the policies, it's the practices, it's the conflict resolution models, it's the tools. All of those things are so seeped in white supremacy. And so as we've been moving and deepening our experience as a racial justice training center, and now moving into our approach for the last 2 years, our approach, our strategy, and our outcome has been to become a pro-Black organization in all of its fullness. We get the opportunities to really explore what it is we're divesting from, and what does it mean to invest in pro-Blackness. And so for us, we can't take away our understanding of what this society is seeped in, and that is white settler colonialism. Right? So we see that whether we're in South Africa, or we see that whether we're Hawaii, or we see that whether we're in the mainland in the States, right? And this settler colonial experiment relied on the punishment of Native Americans, indigenous folks, and it relied on the punishment of enslaved Africans, right? And so punishment is so key and core to white supremacy. And we see it in our organizations all the time. So it's not just getting a new, Black executive director, or like, that white exec director who's been there for 30 years, they done left. It's not that. It's ridding ourselves of the core values that are entrenched in our organizations. And namely, one of those is punishment, right? And so we see that from our own experience as African descended people is, we had the folks who were the enslavers, the slave patrols, the police, and now we have the hierarchical and punishing ways of white leadership in our organizations. So for us at Compass Point, it's really important that what we're investing in is pro-Blackness that challenges punishment. And we see that explicitly and implicitly in our organizations, right? So sometimes I'll see, we offer trainings and capacity building workshops and cohort leadership spaces. We've been really lucky to work with Center for Third World Organizing on their Praxis project and offering a series of trainings for their Black-led organizations. But what we're really seeing is that there are some steeped ways that we think about governing our organizations. So one, for instance, right, we just accept these things like managing people. We walk around and we talk about managing people. That has been a problem for Black people. When our bodies are managed, right, there is cruel punishment at the end of that, right? Lynchings, incarceration, whatever it is. So for us, we have an opportunity in developing our liberatory work to develop more liberatory frames, including not punishing people. So we don't manage people, we manage systems, and we support people to be in those systems, right? We don't do things like offer performance improvement plans, right? These are just tools of punishment. We offer ways to think about support and accountability for our staff. Now, those are things that are a little bit more explicit on how Black people and people of color continue to be punished in formerly white land, white bread organizations. But there's some more implicit ones. And I'll give an example and I'll end on this. So when I came into the organization 4 years ago, it was coming off the last bits of the former executive director, who was the last white executive director, sole executive director. I now co-executive with another white woman who's, it's been a good journey to really parse that out, right? But when we moved away from a sole white executive director and I came into the organization, what I saw was that there were implicit ways of punishment, particularly for Black people. So we had majority Black women who were working in the organization, or the majority of Black women who were working in the organization were mothers, right? And our organization at the time did not offer things like 100% dependent coverage. So we had these sisters with their children who had second and third jobs, just to hustle to get that 50% dependent coverage, although our salaries, I think, were really at market rate. So one of the ways in which we decided that we wanted to divest from punishment and invest in liberatory pro-Black space was to think about how do we offer 100% dependent coverage for our staff, and centering the experiences of Black women so that Black women didn't have to hustle on 2 or 3 jobs, right? Because what they really valued was time with their children. They really valued the health of their children. And so when we made that shift part of our business model to be able to allow for 50% or 100% dependent coverage, we created space for all the staff members who had children to actually experience 100% dependent coverage. So one thing that we have found that we're really investing in is this concept of targeted universalism that comes out of the Othering and Belonging Institute, that when you center the people who are oftentimes most marginalized and you make changes for them, particularly policy changes, it will shift the reality, the material reality for everybody else. It will make it better for everybody else. And we have seen that in history. When you focus on the experiences, particularly of Black people and Black women, and you shift their worlds, you shift power for them and with them, it shifts power for everybody else, right? And so that's what we're moving into, away from punishment, away from white ways of being, into liberatory ways of being that really build power for Black people and all people.
Do you all understand? Do you get it? Do you understand why I was strutting around Brooklyn yesterday like you couldn't tell me shit? Do you understand? We have people among us like Liz who understand that liberation is a feeling, it's a process, it's a concept, it's something that we get to experience over and over again, but who are also clear about the fact that it is a set of practices, a set of dismantlings and buildings over and over again, right? And are clear about what those processes look like, right? We're gonna come back to Liz because she offered a couple of examples of what this has looked like for their organization and for the organizations that they support. And I know folks want to hear more, right? So we're gonna come back to that. But what I really want to lift up is this, what it is that they're divesting from and what it is that they're moving towards, right? Because this is also part of the practice of liberation. Being clear about the fact that that it takes more than just changing the face of leadership to dismantle white supremacy culture, right? It also takes understanding that that supremacy, it's baked into the systems, right? Baked into all of the systems. It's very powerful, right? And so being clear about that's where the work lives. But also, and this is what I love, right? Presenting a more hopeful future, right? There actually is something that we're moving towards, right? It's pro-Blackness, and that pro-Blackness serves us all, right? And so I just want to appreciate you, Liz, for painting that such a clear picture and for what you're going to continue to share with us about how we get there. So much appreciated. Napo, I want to invite you back in, right? We have organizational capacity building. We have, convening the leadership sector in the nonprofit sector, and we have art. We are blessed to have art. Talk to us about what is this, what is the experience that you are divesting from, that you're moving us away from, and talk to us about what it is that you're moving us towards from where you sit.
Thank you so much, Trish. And I was just thinking in terms of the question that I'm not even sure if for the first time in my life, if I'm moving. And I need to be honest about that because I've spent 27 years of my life as a theater practitioner, as being first of everything, because I was born during apartheid and segregation. And then I woke up one day and we're told that we are free and we have democracy. But I also know the feeling of going with my mom around town and my mom wanting to rush out of town because there's a curfew, or not being able to sit down and enjoy coffee at a restaurant next to a beautiful theater production that has a diverse audience because my mom was never allowed. And if my grandmother was in that space, my grandmother was a cleaner, right? Cleaning after people's messes. And here we are now, after 27 years, having been appointed into this position of executive like Liz USA, and feeling that I've been a poster face all my life, right? Because it feels like somebody's ticking the box that, oh, she's brilliant, we need to have her, right? And if we don't have her, we might lose on the funding, or if we don't have her, we are not progressing, we are not transformative, and so constantly I find myself stuck into being first of everything. And when I get to those spaces, I'm not just fighting white supremacy or white structured or white policies. I don't have a point reference of people like me, who speak like me, who sound like me, who think like me, who are loud, who are dramatic, who are artistic. So also there's that element of always having to prove that your voice matters, that your ideas are as great around the boardroom as any other member, right? But also you've got a community that amplifies you, that thinks you are Jesus, right? And this is where I am. And I want to go back to this thing of saying, I'm not sure if I'm moving, because I keep having to tell my community people who this is a dream, not my dream only, our dream, right? There's a saying in our language that a dream is not a dream until it belongs to the whole community, right? So they see me in these spaces and they feel like, finally, there's going to be change. Finally, there's going to be transformation. This is a saint. This is Jesus. Things are going to happen. And for the first time in my life, I found myself saying, but I am not Jesus. I am not a saint. I am an ordinary Black girl who grew up in the countryside, who saw the need to be louder than everybody else, who knew that she was enough artistically, who knew that even if I went to theater school, that a Black man or a white man and a white woman cannot write for me and my people and those who sleep, sound, walk, and articulate like me. But also going into those spaces that I'm trying to move from in a way, subconsciously, in terms of the kind of works that I create, the kind of plays that I put on stage, the kind of doors that I'm pushing, the kind of walls that I'm, really dismantling, the kind of education system. Even when I teach African theater history, I'm trying to dismantle that theater didn't start from Greece, that art, performance, song, dance, poetry, beauty, it's a part of our DNA as Africans. And all these are part of our theatrics, right? So I don't have to say anything. The way my body moves, the way I speak, the way I dress, it's art. So for me, it's making sure that, and I suppose it will answer your question, that's what I'm moving from, that every young girl must have a point of reference, because I didn't have a point of reference. Everything that I studied at theater school, everything, when I did my thesis, I had to go to the highest mountains of my people to find undocumented narratives of Black women and bring those voices and archive those voices and make sure that those voices have a space on this white institution unapologetically. So I'm constantly reimagining, reliving, retelling, reshuffling and reclaiming, and just in sort of as a wrap up, decolonizing our education system. You cannot be in Africa, right? And constantly we are being taught the history that is not of the majority of people within this continent. And when we talk about our history, it has to be the bad, the good, the ugly, the laughter in it. That when you tell a story of a Black woman, even if it's a painful story, we laugh. We are sensual beings. We've got queens who are queer, who marry other women, and bring all this context within the space of theater unapologetically, and having to say, theater for us is not a structure. It can happen anytime, any day. So this platform for me is an opportunity for me to make sure that any Black girl around the world of my skin color, when they see women like us, they know it's possible, but also that they have it easier than we had it, and that they would not be viewed as Jesus, as saints, as martyrs, as anything that is godly beyond just themselves. Lastly, there's a perception every time a Black woman gets into an executive space, and this is my experience, that we need to clean house. So I'm cleaning a lot of house. And I started with weeds, and I said there's a giant tree. I have to consider the environment. I can't cut the tree, but this tree has been here for 40 years before I was even born, right? And then I've adapted this house that I didn't build, that I was never allowed to, but hey, I've moved into this house. But when I get inside, there's a mess. There's dishes. So constantly I have to tell everybody, like, wash the dishes, have table manners. This is not how we behave in this house. So it's also constantly, and it's not just for the young, it's for the young and the old. So this is, I suppose, in transformation, like I'm cleaning house. So I've been spending a lot of my time in the office, not creating, but cleaning house. That every day I'm like, I'm just cleaning house. I'm just making sure there's fresh air. Let's open the windows. Let's make sure we open the door so that, Trish or Liz, can come and ask for sugar, for salt, right? Let's sit outside and bask in the sun. And even if we didn't plant this tree, it's on our land, and that's our tree. And we can literally enjoy the shade and not be imprisoned for it. So in a nutshell, that's sort of where, and then I bring all this academic and the different expertise of strategy of different system of decolonizing, but also speaking the language of metaphors, the language that everybody can understand. Now, when I say let's clean houses, because the dishes have been dirty and have been dirty for more than 48 years. And when I say let's change the linen so that, Erica doesn't walk and sleep on a dead, on a bad, dirty bed. She deserves a bed full of roses, and she has to enjoy it, and she doesn't have to get a permission from anybody else except to just ask me to say, hey, sis, do you want us to have a coffee or a glass of wine? Artistically, and we can do that across the diaspora and across the continent and the world. So I'm cleaning house. I have not yet moved, but maybe perhaps I have moved or I'm moving. It's just that I'm in between the spring cleaning.
I mean, I want to start by saying that Erica does deserve to sleep on a bed of roses. That's the thing I want to lift up. I also, so just to pull back the curtain a little bit, thank you for doing that actually, Amzi, because I was gonna say, while Napa was talking, like I had this backstage view, and my colleagues here are like, we're snapping and clapping and just so much resonance. And when we come back to this conversation about the practices that are moving us, I really want to talk about this thing that you are naming around what does it look like to be put into these positions of leadership and to be pulled into the house cleaning, right? To want to resist it with everything that you're in and just be stepping fully into your leadership and moving forward and going towards something and knowing that you can't do that because the house is filthy, right? Like, how is it that we hold that tension of understanding that like it's something that has to be done, and also it's not our responsibility all of a sudden, right? Because that stuff, as you said, has been there for 48 years, 50 years, Liz, like age old in the case of we're coming to you, Asia, but so just how do we hold that tension? But the thing that I want to like make sure that we name before I move to you, Dr. Reynolds, is just this vision that you presented it with. Can y'all imagine? Can y'all imagine a world where Napo is just the standard? Like her brilliance, her elegance, her wisdom, her grace, the way she moves, the way she speaks is just like regular, right? Like we're looking at it is the standard. It's like, can you imagine? Like, aren't you ready? Aren't you ready for those kinds of institutions? Aren't you ready for that kind of art? Aren't you ready for that kind of world, right? And I love that that's the vision that you've set, right? That other Black girls and hopefully everybody who's looking at you understands that this is possible as just a way of being, right? Ashe. I want to encourage people before I'm coming to you, Dr. Reynolds. You know, just what's coming up for you? Questions, things that you want to hear more about. Like you get to tell me where to tell them to go. So please share your questions in the chat. Let us know what's resonating for you and what you want to hear more about. But we heard the sister talking about decolonizing education, Asia, and I imagine that maybe, perhaps, you have had some experience with you've had some of this experience. I heard you talk about it a little bit in your intro about how this is a powerful place to be doing your work from, and also it is a troubled place to be doing your work from. So can you talk with us about, from where you sit in academia, what is the thing that you're trying to divest from, and the thing that you're trying to put in front of us as a better way forward?
Thank you for this question, Trish. And I really wanted to just go back to Erica reframing what it means to transform, because I think when I first heard like transforming white institutions, I have a knee-jerk reaction, right? I have this knee-jerk reaction as an abolitionist who is thinking about full abolition, right? What it means to take down, destroy these places, but build something else, right? And so, and thinking about like the fact that I remember hearing my mentors before me say like they don't do DEI on campus, right? And I always was like, why don't people want to do DEI? And then I got into a university and was like, oh, this is why y'all don't want to do DEI, right? Like, because it's just never ending cycle of meetings, no budget, no plans go anywhere, right? And so just this use of time of us acting and performing like we believe in justice and we believe in something else. And so now I get to experience that and see that firsthand. But when you're talking about decolonizing education, so for me, as I'm thinking about what I divest from, and a lot of times I think I'm running from the university, but trying to take the resources and power that the university has to replace them somewhere else, right? What it means to redistribute both resources and power. And so, I always say that's not my political home. One of the best advices I got about the working in academia is that it's just a gig, right? But I love, Erica, what you were saying about how do we make sure the organizations we are in align with the people it's supposed to be accountable to, right? And when I heard you reframe it in that way, I was able to then relate to that, right? Because while I don't think I'm actually invested in trying to change academia or the university I'm at in this totality in that way, I am about making sure you want to do right by these folks, right? You want to be in Detroit in these Black communities, these Black next community, you're going to do right by these folks, right? And this is what do right looks like. And so that has really meant for me taking a lot of risk, taking a lot of risk in deciding how I'm going to do research, why I do research, who I do research with, who gets to be an intellectual in this space or the expert in this space, right? So it's like, if you take me, you have to take me and the homies. Everybody coming with me, right? All the young people coming with me. Everybody get to come through the door with me. And so that's also been me reshaping of like, who are we hiring? How can I help assist with making sure that we have other folks who believe in this as well? And how are we building community in and outside of this space? It also has just really meant even changing the ways that we try to evaluate how we do what we do, right? How we do our work. And so much of it is about like, oftentimes you'll see many of us write a piece or write a book, and it's about so many other people that we've been in collaboration and partnership with, but the university only want to know what I did, right? And so I even had to, like, in my last evaluation was like pushing back on like, this, if we're about community work, if we're about being in service to community in this way, all my work is collaboration, right? I'm always working with somebody else. They might not have written a word on this paper, but I'm always in collaboration and partnership. And so I'm not going to do a breakdown of what percentage I did, what percentage they did, right? Like, this was a collaborative piece, and I need you to honor that in that way, right? And so really having to push back on those structures in that way, not only for myself, but for my other colleagues and my grad students. And so it's been beautiful to be in this position to even mentor young people who think I only can do research in this damaging traditional way that's centered around whiteness, right? And I always tell people I do work with Black girls, I'm like, we are vibrant, beautiful people, and we don't even have half of the language that we need to talk about all of the things that we are, right? And so I need space and whatever I do to allow them to define themselves, for us to recreate language, move things around. And so I need you to be able to support that flexibility of what I want to do in this space that no longer maybe aligns with traditional research, and we're going to call it something else, right? And so it's a lot of risk taking in terms of like, yeah, whatever like that we've been taught or indoctrinated into in terms of what scholarship is, what is research, what is teaching in this space, really trying to disrupt that. And so bringing my full, like I heard you also talk about like wholeness. And so for me, I always talk about educational spaces as oftentimes being places of disembodiment for Black people. And so what does it mean in this space that I can bring my full self in this space? And so that's the other thing that I've just been working for. So when I got hired at this job, I showed up at my interview as my full self, because I felt like I don't want you to get here and then y'all like, we don't know this woman, or we wasn't prepared for this, right? And so really making sure I do that and continuously do that so that other folks don't have to feel like they have to come and fall in line with these respectability politics to be here, or that they have to do certain things in order to get a seat at the table, and being okay with saying, I actually don't want to see that at that table. right? Because I'm building something else over here, but I'm also going to get you the funding and support.
Mm. 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 Mm.
I just want, we don't do this enough in these spaces. I'm like sitting here, I have like all these notes. I want to be like, this is what you said, Aja, and it was this, and it was, I have like, but I actually want to, I want us to take 15 seconds and just like breathe, right? Just like we have just been, we're at like almost an hour of like deep wisdom, right? Like, let's just take it in. Let's take it in with the breath.
Mm. 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 That's so good. Mm.
Thank you for that. Now I am going to come back with what you had to say because because it was a whole word, right? We're going to move to Liz in just a moment, just to get more into these practices. Again, I just want to encourage people to be continuing to let us know like what you want to hear more about. But I just want to pause for just a moment of gratitude, right? So we asked this question about what is it that folks are divesting from and what it is that they're moving towards. And people spoke in vision and in practice, right?
Mhm.
Just now, Asia, I heard you saying, almost answering that question that Napo was bringing up for us around like, what does it look like to exist in a space where like you have to clean house in order to be able to show up as your full self, but like not taking responsibility from it, right? And you said two things really clearly, right? One was you said no to the DEI work, right? You said no to being the facilitator, the figurehead, the face of folks having to learn to do their own learning and healing, right? Particularly,
Mm.
it tends to be white folks who benefit the most from that, right? So you said no to that, right? But what I also heard you say is you listen to your mentors, right? There are people that came before you that were like, it's not the way. Don't go down that path. We have those folks, right? And you're just like, oh, what they're doing, it doesn't really make sense. They've been here for a
Mhm.
minute, right? And what I heard you say is that you listen to your elders. What I also heard you saying is that you're stepping into being an elder, right? You didn't use that
Mm.
language, but everything that you said was about what it is that you're being and creating that will make the road for the next Dr. Aja Reynolds, right? Like the next person that comes in. And I heard you talking about shifting the way that you agree to be evaluated, right? Shifting what the work looks like. I heard you talking about demanding that if you're going into a space, the homies come with you. Everything that you do is collaborative and it will be seen that way. I heard you talking about taking risks, right? Understanding that, however difficult it is, you are in a position of power, right? And so, what is it that you can do from that position that opens the door up a little bit further, right? And the thing I love the most is you talked about redistributing resources, right, and power, right? So, however we feel about these organizations, they're institutions. They often come with resources that the folks that we care about that are in these streets, that are in our families, that are in our communities, they don't have access to, right?
Mhm.
So, what does it look like to make sure that they do have access, Um, and this was echoed by all of the things that I heard from all of you in terms of the practices of building institutions that help us to get free, right? And so So that's the place where we're going to move to before we open it up for questions. Like I really want to get a little bit more into the details of some of these practices, the personal ones, the organizational ones. Liz, I'm coming back to you because this is your whole job, right? And I really heard you saying, I love the way that you talked about like white supremacy living in governance, right? Like it doesn't matter who the person is that's executing, right? If the systems, the structures, the way that they're built, were built in this model, they will do the job of white supremacy, even if the person is brown, even if the person is queer, even if the person is able-bodied or disabled, right? And so it sounds like where you all have put a great deal of the focus. So you shared a couple of examples, but I'm wondering if maybe you could share a couple of more, especially around like some of the mindset work, right? Because you can do the whole thing where you're just like, structure like this, but not like this, right? But like, what's the inner work, that comes along with that? I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks for that, Trish. And I'm just feeling all the things I've been having, like, all these moments right now, listening to Erica and Napo and Dr. Aja. And I think for us at Compass Point, because we're a capacity building organization, we constantly try to live into this strategy of living liberation from the inside out and the outside in. So we think about ourselves as teachers and learners, and we dismiss this idea of experts or expertise. We have a lot of technical knowledge. Our staff have a lot of technical knowledge, a lot of lived experience, a lot of amazing things to teach and learn. But there's also the knowledge of those with whom we serve, right? And we have to really, as part of our work, um, challenge our dependence on expertise. That's part of the mind shift work, right? Because if we don't challenge our dependence on expertise,
Mhm.
then we're constantly going to be looking for the white way of doing things. Right? We're constantly going to be looking for things like DEI to save us. And similar to your approach, Dr. Aja, we don't do DEI. We reject DEI because it still centers the experience of white people. And as if we have to be diverse and included in the white experience. So our focus constantly, whether we're doing internal capacity building work or external capacity building work and training, is we are looking to shift power. We are looking to shift power constantly, right? To understand where it is, where it hides in the crevices, how we can leverage to have power with, how we cannot be afraid of power, and how we can build power, right? I really love something that Erica said. I'm going to reflect on this is part of the individual and personal power is thinking about how I center my wholeness as a Black woman in executive directorship, right? And so for me, I think that there's lots of ways that I think are both individual practices, internal practices, and external practices that help to center my wholeness. And for me, I have to understand that there is some house cleaning to do. So I'm so happy that you shared that, Napo. There is some house cleaning that we have to do, right? And I don't want to set our sisters up or people who are Black in leadership, that when you come in an organization, there is some cleanup you gotta do, right? And for us at our organization, one of those primary things was to align our leadership. So there were board members that needed to leave our organization.
Mm.
And sometimes you got to find the board members that will support you, particularly as an executive director, and that's their role, right? That is their whole role, is to support you. So get a board that actually is down for your leadership, right? I think another thing, both individual and internal, and what we share externally, is really challenging the notions of how communication happens in organizations and how people feel threatened by that. So people are threatened by the ways in which Black women direct, right? And the ways in which Black women communicate. And so that is not just a mind shift, right?
Mhm.
I mean, that's more than just a mind shift, right? I had to really tell my staff, okay, y'all, we are going to be directive now. And I need you to understand that there's no punishment behind it. It is because I see a clear pathway, right? And so that has to take time to reverberate for people because people are afraid of Black people, right?
Mhm.
We have this thing that I heard in a training called polite supremacy. Came from the BIPOC project, and it talks about polite supremacy. So sometimes when you shift in organizations to Black leadership, you start to hear people being really kind and polite, right? And really what's underneath that is they're afraid to challenge Black people. They're afraid to challenge Black women in the ways in which we communicate. So we had to really build kind of a culture of multiplicity and communication.
Mhm.
We had to create pathways to support, right? So I needed to find, I really encourage folks when they get into leadership that they push their boards and or whomever is in charge of creating budgets to line item coaching and or support services for you as an executive director, and not with the sensibility that you have a deficit. Like I can't lead because I'm a Black woman. No, I can lead as critically, right? Napo, Erica, Dr. Aja, we are leading critically. But we
Mhm.
have been so historically under-resourced from support that people don't even think about, well, let me just go ahead and create these systems of structures for, these structures for support for a Black executive director as they're coming in, right? So these are kind of some of the ways that I think we've been positioning ourselves to center wholeness. I'm going to start using that, Erica. Thank you. We're going to
Mhm.
center wholeness for our Black leaders. And essentially, externally, because I think this is some of the question you're asking, Trish, is like, well, you're a training center, you're a capacity building center. So how do you train organizations around this that are also shifting? For us, it requires, again, an analysis of power. So all of our content, all of our curricula, all of our cohorts, which was different than a few years ago when we had Black leadership, we interrogate power from the very beginning. You have to name it, you have to understand your relationship to it, and you have to understand not to be afraid of it, right? Because that's part of our liberatory journey, is to build power. So we align our content around power. We encourage organizations to align their content around power. And in particular, in our cohort learning spaces, which again, I've been so honored to train with the Center for Third World Organizing, and in their initiative that is also supported by your foundation, Trish, and then also your organization, LLC, Erica, the Praxis Project. This is an initiative that C2 created. And let me just say, I'm a C2 alum. I took C2 MAP training 20 years ago, so it's always great to come back. And shout outs to the staff there. They're doing amazing, amazing work. But their initiative is to support organizations, Black-led organizations that are between the years of 0 to 5, right? And that is so critical. It is so critical to start with the organizations. Instead of transforming maybe what were white-led, white-bred organizations, let's seed our own, y'all. Let us seed our own. So C2 has done a really great job of that, and we've been able to train them. And one of the things that we've been really thoughtful about for them is training in Black governance. Again, governance for us is around centering your values, your principles, your structures, your conflict resolution practices, your community engagement, so that it
Mhm.
actually does the work that you're intending to do, and you're not having to create an organization that shifts away from whiteness, but you're creating an organization that is walking towards pro-Blackness. And that can happen in so many ways, y'all. So many ways. So many ways. There's not a deficit that we have in creating Black organizations and Black ways of being in an organization.
Mhm.
Um, I'm coming to you next, Napo, and I wanna come back to something you said earlier, Liz, as you were describing some of these practices around interrogating and shifting power. Um, just this reminder that pro-Blackness is for all of us, right?
Mhm.
Um, you made that point, and my mind went to, um, the folks upon whose shoulders we stand, the women of of the Combahee River Collective, right, who talked about using our position at the bottom to make revolutionary leaps, right? And, I hear like, yo, who doesn't need a coach? Who doesn't need to have a supportive governing body, right? Who doesn't need to have, who doesn't benefit from a multiplicity of communications, from direct communication? I'm about to say a thing. This is how it might land. This is how it's supposed to land. Like all of these things that you're naming, you know, um, it's seen as an alternative view and one that supports our leadership. But I want to come back to this notion that you raised, that pro-blackness, it supports us all. And I just want to thank you for like naming so clearly and the practices around that, because it's just deeply resonating, deeply resonating. Napo. I'm coming back to you because one, I think all of us just want to look at you some more and hear hear your wisdom and brilliance and feel your energy and like, so say whatever. And you are wise and brilliant and have these lived experiences and I think a very particular perspective in terms of how we move these same conversations around power through arts and culture, right? Both through
Yes.
the institutional aspect of it and the creative aspect of it. And so, just the same question, like talk to us about these practices and processes that you're engaging in that help to move us towards this more liberated space.
So my number one, Trish, is fear versus respect, right? Black people, we've been made to fear. And not just to fear, white structures and white systems and places, right? But just the fear of each other. So one of the key principles, and I always tell my staff and my team, and I prefer to call them my team, like I just said, I'm about collaboration and teamwork. And also because we are such communal people, like an art, it's a communal thing. It's meant, hence, even if you have a poem, it's a poem, but until you share it with everybody, it's not enough. We want the applause, but it takes a whole community to create work or to breathe life into a story, even if it's just written by me. But for me, I always say to my team, don't fear me. I don't operate on fear. I operate on respect. And when I'm saying respect, it means that I hold you accountable. There are things, just because you are like me, you are Black, and you fought hard. When you walk into the spaces, you cannot underplay or undervalue the privilege that you have. So you have to own your privilege, because the majority of us, died for us to be here, but the majority of us don't have access to what we have. So don't fear me, respect me, see me as an equal. Right? That's number one. And as a result, I'll hold you accountable and you hold me accountable. And together as a community, we will, dismantle and rebuild what we want collectively, which is an African principle. The other one is, and it goes back to, again, Dr. Aja was talking about mentors. One of the best advice that I had from a Black, theater practitioner who's very well known, John Kani, and literally broke so many, rules. But he once looked at me and said that there is a reason why our industry is called show business. You as an African child are already a show. Because you can sing, you can write, you can speak, you can dance, you can do all that. It's part of your blueprint. Focus on a longer word that we were never taught, the business side. So when you walk into the space, your mind you're not just a performer, you are an entity, you are a product. As a result, you are currency. So it means you cannot just bow and apologize. You have to walk tall, because what you have has a price tag, but you determine the price, right? So the business principle of arts and culture being ways in which we sustain ourselves and benefit as Africans, as opposed to being constantly the ones who are the source, but not the beneficiaries, right? The other one is the understanding that it's okay for me to say no, even to a Black person, and to create boundaries. That just because I'm in this space, you don't just walk and have access and invade my privacy, invade and impose and force me to do things that are not aligned with my vision, mission, and my objectives, right? So that's that. So I'm myself, I'm so fully equipped that when I say no, I'm not saying no because you are Black. I'm saying no because it's not aligned within the vision I have as an executive, as a director, as all these other things. When I write a play and you give me notes, if I say no, I'm not going to take your notes because you have not lived and experienced this, that is me as a Black woman or as a woman. I have a right to say that. And that's freedom. That's liberating for me because my people were never in those spaces where they were allowed to say no. But also to honor that, Trish, to honor that and not feel bad. Because often we are made to feel bad for saying no, for creating boundaries, you know, creating a stream around yourself and say, you have to ask for permission to cross over, right? So to trust and to say, yes, I might have been at the first, but I'm not just the first. I'm actually a path maker. And if I'm a path maker, the path will go where I want the path to go because I know what's ahead. I have the vision. I've got longer eyes, as we normally say. Lastly, to trust and believe in oneself. And this is for me personally, what my own script that I write every day in my head when I walk into an office and I walk every day to say that as long as I operate within my gifts and talents, my expertise and my qualifications, it doesn't matter where I'm seated. The table will shift to honor me, to see me, to hear me. But more than anything, I've got a right to sit anywhere I want. So I don't have to be on the tail, on the head, on the side. If I operate within my gift, I will not be intimidated by the other. I will not be apologetic of the other. I will just sit because I am enough. I have enough. And when I start to speak, it's because I carry with me 3,100 years of voices of people who have been here before me. And that means I cannot fail.
A 100%. I mean, I'm listening to you and you're talking about the art space, which is, we know, particularly both beautiful and fraught. And I'm like, you could be talking about so many spaces that we're in, right? To understand yourself as both essential, you know, when you talked about show business, to understand yourself as both essential and objectified, right? Dismissed, right? Like, you know, how many of us are having that experience, right? Running organizations, being in institutions, nobody else could teach this, nobody else could do this, and yet I'm treated as though I'm disposable, right? So kind of understanding that dynamic, I heard you talking about creating boundaries, right? Understanding that even though you're representing something that is new and important in a shift, right? You're not accountable and accessible to everybody for anything, right? I heard you talking about that. These are all lessons and practices that it doesn't, you know, I can imagine it holds a particular complexity in the arts because it's so personal, and like these are things that we need to be in practice around wherever we are, whatever institutions we're trying to transform. We're gonna close with this with a question I'm gonna put to Erica and Aja about like because you started to talk about this too, both you and Liz Napo, about some of these are personal mind shifts also, right? So yes, we're talking about how we're shifting institutions and the practices that organizations or teams need to be engaged in, but you know, you said I write a script in my head every day, right? There are these personal things that we have to do, that we have to shift, that we have to step into in order to be able to do this work of transformation or facilitate this work of transformation that I'm also very curious about. So I'll start with you, Erica, and you know, we're gonna end with this question with Erica and Aja. So if there are any burning questions that folks out in the audience have that they want to make sure that we get to, or have folks end on, like, please please drop it in the chat. But Erica, can you talk about some of the just some of the inner work, some of the personal and interpersonal work that you've really had to engage in order to be able to do this work of transformation?
Sure. I mean, we're still transforming as opposed to having been transformed. And the interesting part about that is that, you know, every time you feel like, oh, you've cleaned up we talk about cleaning up messes, you've cleaned up some portion of the house, you go back and there's still debris. And I realized that, you know, and I actually inherited an organization, a staff team, a board, a community that was very much open to transformation. I didn't come into like a super dirty house. And so I also realized that the mess is in me. So it's in all of us. It's not just in the organization. And so it's a real consistent process. And so, you know, but I'll talk about like personally, it's like really faith and trust in myself and in others has been pretty essential, like being able to practice vulnerability, being able to say, I don't know, being able to not hide flaws, and learning to not hide flaws. So I can't say that I don't do it. But you know, it's going to come out anyway, but if you don't hide it, at least it doesn't come out like extra funky. So learning in the process of learning not to do that. I wasn't able to do that just on my own. Liz, you brought up coaching, and coaching has been essential, and the kind of coaching that you get really matters. And so shout out to Belma, my coach. I have a coach who isn't trying to fix me. She isn't starting from the perspective that I'm broken. Usually she's asking me to ask myself, why didn't I already know I was awesome? Why didn't you already know you could do it? Let's talk about that as opposed to thinking about what's wrong with you. And so that has been really essential. A lot of, like, when I said trusting myself, a lot of this has been about trying on new things, new practices, new ways of being. And often it's just freeing me to be me. Like, I am marshmallow soft. I like things soft. I'm soft with people. I want people to be soft with me. And, but that's not how you learn to be a boss. That's not how you learn to be a leader. And so learning to unlearn what it means to actually be in a leadership position and finding strength in being soft meant that, like, you know, my thinking is less linear. It's less binary. It's less angular. It's less sharp in that way, that I allowed in some softness, some emergence and nuance, which actually results in more values alignment for me. Because some of those sharp angles are those butts that sit between your practice and your values. And so if I say, I really believe that people should be treated like this, my action should match that, even if it's not in alignment with what it means to be, you know, a boss lady. And in some ways there is a little bit of sharpness and sort of learning to identify some boundaries, like Napo talked about. There's some times when I came in as a Black ED and co-ED when I was being centered, and then I was like, but how come the centering feels so bad? And it's because I wasn't being centered, I was being exploited and tokenized. And so being able to say, that's not for me. Being able to ask for help. I say, they say birds of a feather flock together. So sometimes you got to find a new flock. And so I'm gonna hang out with Trish, right? I'm gonna hang out with birds that are helping me get to where I want to go. And I have a team of really awesome people. They're all texting me. They're like, you're great. And they're we're constantly supporting each other. And so that means that when I'm doing that, do as I say, not as I do kind of behavior, like working when you're sick, they're like, no, Erica, we don't want any more emails from you. And it helps me, it frees me to say, I don't feel well. I'm going to get offline. And so we are being able to be open to be loved and loved. So to be soft for others and allow others to be soft for me, and then, has been essential. And so some of that being soft with myself and with others is letting stuff go. So like this whole house is not clean. Some rooms I'm going to get to it when I get to it, and everybody's going to have to be all right with that. And we're going to do, the best we can. And like I said, unlearning some things, like, letting go of some attachment about what it means to be, strong Black woman, leader, business, like some of that stuff that's killing us literally. And so now I'm like a broken record. I ask the same question over and over again. How can this be easy? how can this be easy? Like why are we struggling over here? This could actually be easy. And so I think for me, those are some of the things that I've personally have been trying to practice. And, hopefully I'll get better and better at it. But that's been essential for me to as part of this transformational process.
Lots of love, lots of resonance. Erica, didn't you hear Napo earlier? You deserve to sleep on a bed of roses, right? Did she not say that? Yes to softness. Yes to values alignment. Yes to leading with trust. Like all of it. And I just, Adrienne Marie Brown tells us that small is all, right? And so I really just appreciate how you're calling in, like, not just the work that you're doing, but like I do it because I have to do it in order for this thing that I want to see out in the world to manifest. And so, yeah, thank you for sharing that, for your vulnerability, for your practice. Yeah, we're gonna close this question with you, Dr. Reynolds, Asia. What is it that you're practicing personally and interpersonally, to be ready to support this transformation at the institutional level?
Thank you for that. I love what Erica said about making sure like my values align with my practice. And I say that because, as I stated earlier, that I'm a Black feminist abolitionist. And so I'm always thinking about what does that mean to all things that I'm doing in my personal life and in my professional life, right? Those things are entangled and that it shows up that way. And part of that has been really, like I've been part of all these spaces of thinking about care, what is a care ethics and what is a care ethics for Black women and Black girls. But really just realizing how much I was creating spaces for other people and not for myself, right? And two, like statistics when I was in grad school really stuck with me. One, the growing number of Black women that develop mental illness while like going through a doctorate program, right? And then two, really thinking about, and this is even before Bell Hooks passed, but thinking about June Jordan and some others of like how many Black women we prematurely see die before they even hit 60, right? And so those things really stuck with me. And really had me take stock of one, what was living in my body, right? Because as I was saying before, many of these institutions require our disembodiment, right? And so we get so used to it that we just get in and we're so used to getting up, leaving the house and putting on a mask and doing this for everybody else and not even taking stock of like what it's doing to the body. When I had to really take stock of what it was doing to my body, to my mental, to my spiritual, it wasn't pretty, right? It wasn't cute. And so that one, I'm thankful for a community of Black women and women of color and other women of color.
Asia, sorry, you're coming in a little bit. I'm having a little bit of trouble hearing you. I don't know if others are. It's like a little bit garbled.
Okay.
I'm getting the message behind what you're saying, and I'm feeling you. So I
Can you
wanted
hear me
to
now?
see. Yes, perfect. Yes, you are clear. Please continue.
Do you hear me better now? Okay, my headphones go down. But I would say that, I also have a community of Black women and women of color friends who really hold me to that, of what it means for us to take care of ourselves, but take care of each other, and what it means to be in community. And I think this has been really important in redefining our relationships, especially for many of us who might be single women who aren't married or in partnerships or have children, what it really meant to have had this type of community around you that's holding you accountable, but also loving on you and reminding you to love on yourself. And so that has really been helpful in all the different spaces that I've been in. But also, right, so like I had to shift this year, how much time, like we always talk about work, life balance. And most of the time, like our it's not no real balance, right? Like most of my time was work. And so I really had to reshape that in terms of how I like managed my week, what time I'm like cut off, done working, I'm done at 5. Like we're not doing that like half days on Friday, right? Like that's me making my schedule to be like, I'm not doing that, but also intentional about my joy, right? And so I think a lot of times we just
you know, we luck up if we're around the right people that joy happens to us, but really having to be intentional about my joy. And so that's also meaning like when I know that like November's about to be crazy for me. And I know November's going to be crazy for me because I have so many deadlines, but I'm also intentional of saying, okay, I know that that's coming. How am I better planning for what's about to come, right? Like, how am I scheduling time in there to be around my good girlfriends in between that time? Do I need to get a spa date in somewhere in between there? Do I need to get a day in there that I go and hang out with my nieces and nephews that also feel me, right? Like, and so just really trying to be thoughtful about what's happening to my body, but thoughtful how I'm using my time and being proactive around that. And so, yeah, I would just say just a lot of being in community, finding joy, creating joy, being intentional about joy, but also trying to reshape my relationship to work and personal life, and it's really trying to find the balance.
I just, first of all, I'm glad that we were able to fix your audio because I would have been mad if we didn't get those last pieces, especially. But just want to appreciate that you're naming it's like these internal shifts, like Erica said, we're transforming, right? These internal shifts, it's like sometimes you actually have to like create a structure around it, right? Like I can't just like assume that joy is going to happen. I can't just be committed to it. I have to actually organize my life and I got to schedule it. If it's not going to come like automatically, I got to be like on Tuesday, there will be joy, right? And you know, I love what you said about like when you cut off your day, like this the intentional community that you've built around each other. This has been a theme that I just have heard resonating throughout this conversation. This balance between um, tapping into what we know and like our sort of organic ways of being, and then also being in serious commitment around these stuff. They are built into, around, and perpetuated through structures, right? And so, as intentional as we are about what we're dismantling, we also have to be intentional about what we're building, right? And I just feel so much gratitude and have learned so much from just hearing you all talk about your practice. So um, I want to close just by hearing from each of you, just one thing that you are that you're taking away from this conversation. I know there was so much, but Erica, how about we start with you? What's one thing you're taking away?
It is unfair for you to ask me to just do one thing. I'm taking away so much. But I'll say that the thing that's really resonating with me is how all of us in some way touched on giving and also demanding care. And I'm wondering, you know, we use the word I, I'm thinking about, I need a spa day, I'm asking for help. And so I'm curious about what the balance of the I and the we is, or how we care for each other. So that's what I'm taking away. Thank you.
Absolutely. How about you, Liz? What's coming up for you?
I am so grateful to have been on this panel, and I feel like I'm just taking the energy of Trish, Nepo, Erica, Dr. Aja into the rest of my day, and really feeling fortified that Black women in leadership is so amazing. It's so amazing. We're so amazing right now, and just the clarity in which we have, and the ways in which we bring our ancestors and our community and our collaborators and our coaches and our bird flock, all of that, all the ways that we bring in ourselves and other people is just amazing. And so I'm just thankful for Black women leadership over and over. So thank y'all.
I'm thankful too, most definitely. How about you, Asia?
Yeah, I think I'm just grateful as well from all the knowledge and wisdom that was on this panel, but really just thinking about, I think Napo might have said it, flipping the script, like of how much all of us in our different perspective contexts are flipping script, and what happens when you have Black women leadership. And as I was saying before, like we don't even have enough language to talk about the ways and the value of Black women. And you just can't really it can't be taught, right? It just can't be taught. And so I'm just thankful for being part of this.
Ashe. Napo, we close with you. Yes. Oh,
And
how
I'm going to
about you?
do
What are you?
a poem. Can I just read something? Some people are made of storms and demons. Others are carved by tornadoes and constellations, while some are partly fire and stars. Then those who are like us, who are one in a million, are patterns of cliffs and hills and mountains. So sister friend, do not lose your miracle on pain or loss or the unknown. It always takes a village to create art. And sometimes you need to look back to remember how far you come. And it is women like us sometimes who have to die 9 times for us and others to be liberated. Thank you.
Napo, Asia, Liz, Erica, on behalf of all of us, just thank you for everything that you are, everything that you're birthing, everything that you're carrying, everything for everything. We so appreciate you. And yeah, we'll close it out with that. And just wish everyone a beautiful rest of the conference. So thank you. Mhm. Thank you all so much. I'll turn it back to you, Karishi.
Woo! Listen, if today wasn't church, it was church. Can the people say church? Hello? I mean, there were just so many. Like, yeah, I want to say hell yeah. That's why you was stomping around Brooklyn, owning the space and feeling like you was everything yesterday. It's so much, right? We are living liberation, y'all. We are embodying freedom up in here. We are honoring the work up in here. We are living our values up in this piece, right? And it is so fresh. I'm honored I'm like, wow, like, listen, they say I am because we are because I am, right? I say Ubuntu, what's up, Napo, right? And the law of attraction means that people can't be around you and not reflect you, right? And that this is these are my folks. They reflect me. I'm a bad mama jamma. Let me tell you, can't say nothing to me. Y'all some fire up in here. Okay, so look, the bottom, like underneath liberatory leadership, we're holding the idea of connectedness and praxis, right? And so that's what we're about to jump into. We got some cool panels for y'all to go into next. So you're gonna have to go take a breather. If you smoke, go smoke. If you need to go breathe some fresh air, go walk around the block real quick, use the bathroom, get ready for your next 2 panels. Soak some of this in, write down your questions. Go to our message board. So you're going to log out of the current room that you're in, and you're going to go back to the main event and look at that board. You'll see on the left-hand side, you'll see the schedule. Right before you click the room that you're going to go into next, I ask that you go and you write down some thoughts. What are your takeaways from this morning? What were the moments that you said, oh, right, where it resonated with you? Where's the thing that you're still scratching your head at? Like, I can't even believe they said that. Okay. Thank you all, beautiful women who reflect me. Thank you all for being in my community. Thank you all for your gift and honoring. I truly appreciate you.